So tonight I want to welcome Matt, who is our guest. Um, the Ask Me Anything uh, live events format is basically um, the first 10 to 15 minutes. I basically ask Matt questions just to uh, help all of you learn about his background, uh, his experience, how he got to where he is today. And then for the remainder 45 minutes, we'll open it up for questions. Sounds good? And so we have someone who is so we have Matt with us, and to give you a little bit intro about Matt, he's someone who has worked as a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, at a tech company. He's also now working as the Chief Software Architect at a company called WePay. And the reason I reached out to Matt and asked him to join, and it was actually Matt who reached out to me a few months ago, is that Matt has been helping bootcamp grads. There's a bootcamp in San Francisco called Rhythm School, and Matt has been speaking at Rhythm School and helping bootcamp grads navigate the job search. And I asked him to join tonight to provide a unique perspective from a hiring manager, someone who actually interviews and hires people. So when all of you are done with your coding boot camps, or you're done with doing free code camp and learning, and you have a portfolio, and now you're starting to do your job search, you know what to expect. So I want to just say, welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, of course. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Matt, and we always kick off by asking our guests to introduce themselves. I gave our community a quick background about you, but can you tell folks a little bit about what you do today, and how did you get to where you are today as well?
Sure. Well, today I'm a chief architect at WePay, as you mentioned. WePay at the end of 2017 was actually also acquired by JP Chase. So I am now an employee officially of JP Chase. Scroll down on my shirt, it says Chase Company. Anyway, so I actually do interface a lot with Chase. So one of the reasons that Chase wanted to acquire WePay was to learn about how technology companies operate and to leverage those kinds of things. And particularly in areas like Silicon Valley, where I have been for quite a while. And so, a little bit of backstory, I started, programming when I was 7 years old. It's a while ago. And, I spent some time in the military. I started my own company. I've done a lot of other kind of consulting work all around the country. And so through all of that, I've definitely learned a lot. And recently, and by recently I mean in the last 5 years or so, I've been really interested in helping boot camp type of communities. It's not just boot camps; it's really anybody that is coming into the industry or trying to come into the industry that doesn't have a 4-year computer science degree. And one of the reasons for that is that historically, companies have really had no reason not to cater their hiring practices to those people coming out with 4-year degrees. And there's a whole lot of value coming out of these kinds of boot camps.
One sec, Matt. Yeah.
And that people understand where, how valuable you are when you come out of these. And so, as most of you are probably aware, most of these boot camps will typically require a huge investment of your time and a great commitment. You, in lots of cases, have to drop everything in your life for a number of weeks or months, and spend 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. It's a huge amount of work, but that's dedication, right? And on top of that, when you come out of this, you have a diversity advantage. Now, equality and everything is important and great, but what it really means is cognitive diversity. Now, if you give, a whole bunch of people that have the same exact background and training the same problem, you're likely to get multiple copies of the same solution. But if you have a very diverse experience set, which is what you get by default from people coming out of boot camps, you're going to get a much more robust, much better solution. You're going to think of lots of things that you might not otherwise consider. And so it is a huge value proposition for any company. And I have been trying to evangelize on both sides of the fence to, increase confidence and help prepare people for interviewing and getting jobs, and also educating companies on the fact that this is important, and trying to bridge the gap, so that people coming out of programs like this are not such a big.
That's great. And Matt, can you explain to people what the job search typically looks like once they're out of a boot camp, just so people know what to expect?
Sure. The first thing that I'm going to just it is not easy, but that shouldn't deter you. What you want to make sure that you realize is that any company that you're interfacing with is going to have a very shallow just view of you, and any kind of decision that they make is not a judgment of you or how good of an engineer you are. Ultimately, the job search process isn't even about whether or not you're a good engineer. You are actually trying to determine that you are a good fit for a role, and the company is also trying to determine whether or not you'll be a good fit for the company and the role. Not
Hmm.
all processes are equal, but do not take it personally if a company says no. Right, that will happen a lot, and the best thing that you can do is keep trying and keep practicing, doing interviews and preparing. A typical interview process is going to involve some.
One second, Matt. Uh, can people just mute their microphones if you're not speaking? Because I'm hearing someone. No, it looks like everyone is muted, but I'm still hearing some sound. Thanks.
Sure. What I was saying is a typical interview process is going to involve some amount of screening. There are lots of tools available online that can help companies with that. And also meeting with engineers on the phone, possibly doing shared coding sessions and that sort of thing. And then, and then people will typically be brought on for a series of on-site interviews. Companies do that a lot differently, but typically companies will be looking for some combination of behavioral and technical skills. And there are certainly things that you can do to better prepare yourself for those interviews.
Yeah, Matt, and I think on this AMA, we are gonna unpack the interview process more, how to prepare, how to stand out. I know there's some people who are just joining Career Karma like today or this week, and we always kind of preach that tech is not just the companies like the people expect, Google and Facebooks of the world. Tech is disrupting every industry, including banks, including healthcare, including education. Uh, I'm about to do like a tally, and I'm going to ask our community to guess how many engineers a company like Chase has. And I'm not sure if, Matt, you know the answer, but you can guesstimate, and we'll tell people how many engineers Chase has. But I would love our community to post in the chat your guesses for the number of software developers, engineers you think a bank like Chase has. We can say worldwide. Let's go with worldwide. Okay, so we have some guesses. 1,000, 2,500. Someone said 10,000, 700. Anybody think it's less than 100? If this is your, I mean, if that's what you think, please post. Anybody think it's less than 500? Someone said 70, 50. Someone said 5. And I usually ask this question when we do the orientation and we get an array of responses. And the truth is that a lot of the consumers, we only interface with a website, and it's hard for us to imagine how many people behind the scenes are building out systems. And for a company like Chase, I can imagine there's a lot of systems that they have. And Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would you say is your guess on how many engineers that Chase employs?
Well, I actually know this because I work directly with the head of global technology recruiting for JP Morgan Chase for all of Chase. That's actually one of my core responsibilities right now. And to kind of put the scale into perspective, one of the first was I need to hire 12,000 engineers in the next year, right? So Chase actually has around the globe close to 50,000 software engineers, which I actually have to, I explain similar things to, a lot of people that have questions about that, because you're absolutely right. When somebody says technology company, you don't think of Chase. Well, it's a
Hmm.
bank. But the reality is that all industries and all companies require software engineers to be successful, right? We're automating things. We are building websites. We're building mobile apps, all these kinds of things. And people are not moving money by hand, right? This is all electronics. It's all
Hmm.
computers. And it actually requires a lot of people to support that in doing it globally. Chase actually has technology hubs all across the globe. I have to go to 2 of them in the next month, right? And it's something that's very important.
Yeah. And Matt, I'm glad that you're bringing up 50,000 as the number, because 50,000 is also the number of computer science graduates that graduate in the United States every year. So if you think about the proportions, there's 50,000 computer science graduates, and a single company like Chase needs to hire they needs to hire 12,000 people in the next year, and in total they have 50,000 people who work there working as software engineers. So this is why we tell people that if you know how to code, it's not an easy journey, but you have a lot of leverage in your career, because there's Chase, right? There's Bank of America, there's Wells Fargo. Last week we had someone who worked at BlackRock, and these are just finance companies. Then you have healthcare companies, right? And so our world needs technologists, and that's what we're saying is in today's day and age, you get a lot of leverage in your career when you do have tech skills. What are some challenges, Matt? What are some challenges with hiring 12,000 people? Where do you even find them?
Well, that's actually not even the first challenge. The first challenge is deciding who you want to hire, right?
Hmm.
There is not one archetype for a technologist, right? And it's important actually on both sides of the fence, right? So you have a company that needs to understand who is going to be a good fit, what kind of software development practices do we want to have, and then you also
On,
and of company or environment is right for you. And then it's like dating. You have to go and find the right one, right?
hmm.
Uh, so we spent a lot of time trying to define what great looks like. It was a big project, and we were trying to figure out what is the right, you know, type of engineer for different kinds of positions and places in the org. But once you do that, getting the message out, right, and finding those right people is hard. You talk to boot camps, you talk to colleges, you do other kinds of marketing, word of mouth. You have a lot of networking. Referrals is a huge deal, for companies that need that kind of volume. And there are also risks associated with that can inadvertently undermine diversity, right? So it's just a very, very complicated problem.
Yeah. And I'm sure our community has a lot of questions um, for you, and we're about to open it up for them. In terms of the work that you've done with Rhythm, what are some of the things that you observed about bootcamp grads?
So that's something that we actually talked about a little bit too. One of the things I noticed, I kind of mentioned before, is not really recognizing the value that you have to add. And because a lot of these hiring practices are still catering to people coming out with CS degrees, it can be harder. But nobody that is coming in at the entry level knows how to do the job already. You can end up with imposter syndrome, think that you don't belong there, but you really do, right? If you can demonstrate the skills that you have, you can add value. Right? I've talked to the founders of lots of different boot camps, and typically what they aim for is giving people enough experience and enough ability to add value so that they go and fill in a lot of the blanks, right? But the reality is that industry is changing at a faster and faster rate. And it is, it is natural that we have these things like boot camps, because it becomes necessary for people to retrain themselves, possibly multiple times in their career. And that's really what a boot camp is, right? And so this is something that thankfully, more recently, companies are starting to understand, right? Do not lose hope. Give yourself the credit that you deserve. You can provide enormous value. Another thing that I've noticed is that a lot of bootcamp graduates can tend to be strong in areas that these other engineers, the stereotypical engineer, might be weaker at. And a lot of those soft skills actually become more important as you rise through the ranks. So that's something to think about too.
Yeah, that's great, Matt. And I'm so happy that you're on our AMA tonight, providing a different perspective, a perspective of someone who does the hiring. I'm gonna ask our community to introduce themselves and ask Matt questions. Just mention 30 seconds about like who you are, if you're doing a boot camp, where you're coming from, your background, and then you can ask Matt any questions that you want.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Brooke.
I'm Brooke, and I was just wondering how much of those engineering jobs can be automated as far as like being flexible and transitioning and trying to learn new skills. Sorry, not to be a downer, but.
Not a downer, actually. That's a concern that people really have, right? But the reality is that automation, more often than not, actually creates more new jobs than it takes away. You have these very old stories about, tellers in banks, these new things called scams, right? Right? But that's not what happened, right? You end up having some portion of the things that get automated, and then you have more jobs to maintain the stuff that drives the automation. You have programmers for whatever the automation is, and then you have new things that people can focus on. If it can be automated, then a lot of times what that actually enables people to do is to actually use higher level skills to do things that are actually even more valuable.
How you doing, Matt? Hello?
Hey, Greg. Yeah, hey, Greg. What's going on? Good to see you.
Hey, how you doing, Timur? How you doing, Matt? My name's Greg Jordan. I attend Lambda School, and I'm about 3 months away from graduating or completing Lambda School. And I'm noticing that going through a boot camp, at the rate in which they go through the curriculum, it allows you to be able to understand things you didn't know. So had you not known about programming before, it teaches you what programming is, the functionality of different programming language, markup languages, HTML, so forth and so on. And my question to you would be, coming out of school, having some fundamental skills, what would be the best way to level up my skills so that I can, one, bypass imposter syndrome, and two, be prepared to be interviewed by a company like yourself?
So there are a lot of things. I actually think that those are two different things. Everybody struggles with imposter syndrome differently. If you want to level up your skills, keep them, keep doing projects, do things for yourself. There are a lot of things that you can contribute to in open source. Look and think about problems that you want to solve and figure out, well, how can you contribute to that and just learn about it. And as you're preparing for interviews with companies like WePay, one of the things that I will say is that we use specific technologies, especially at the entry level. I have no interest in you having prior experience in the technologies that we use. That's not what it's about, right? So it's about understanding those core concepts and those fundamentals. I mean, if I mentioned that I started programming when I was 7, the technologies that were used at that time, there's almost no overlap right now. What is actually important is that you can learn new concepts, new technologies, and apply them in ways that make sense, right? So if you're exercising those skills, you will be learning more and gaining more experience, and then you want to actually give an accurate portrayal of that when you're in an interview situation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question about the boot camp. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. The boot camp is like a college, like we have to complete like a certain types of the credit hours, or it's just we can do like a part-time, or how it's gonna work, the boot camp? It's like a college hours, like you have to spend the whole like 8 hours in the whole day, or we can do like a part-time, like 2 hours in a day, and how it's gonna work like?
I can also take this one. So I would say, I know this is your first day, and I want you to realize that there's a lot of people on the call like Greg who are attending different coding schools. And so part of your journey on Career Karma is going to be reaching out to people and finding out what schools they're attending. And there are schools that are online. There are schools that are in person. Some are full-time. So I think Greg is doing full-time. So he's doing Lambda, like probably 10, even though they say it's 8 hours a day, it's probably more than 8, 10. Okay.
Okay.
And then there's some that are doing part-time. So there's part-time courses with Flatiron, Lambda, Thinkful. And the nice thing about these schools is they actually don't get you a degree at the end. They help you get a job. And there's a new way for people to pay for these schools, which is called income sharing. And you learn more about it on Career Karma. But basically, you don't have to pay the school until they help you get a job in tech.
Mm-hmm.
And this way, the school now has to teach you things that are relevant. Because with traditional colleges, even, they're going to be teaching you stuff that is good to know and it's useful. But in my opinion, there's still some misalignment in incentives, because by the time you graduate, you're going to have a set of skills, but then you also paid the school when you graduated and not when you actually got a job. So you learn more about that through the experience on Career Karma. Matt, do you want to weigh in or add anything to that? Sorry, I kind of cut you off.
No, I think that's right. What I was going to say is just there's a really diverse set of options, so there's not just one thing. As far as colleges are concerned, another thing to point out there, you have a lot of very standardized curriculum. And so there's one kind of thing that I've noticed a lot from people coming out of those kinds of programs. They can tend to think that, well, there's a book way to do something, and that might be like, from a research perspective, that actually might be true, but when you're actually in business, you can never ever do anything that way. You actually have to take in all the variables about the time and money and resources, product vision, all kinds of things, and come up with solutions to the problems that you have that are going to make sense given the data that you have. And so everybody that comes into the time from that perspective is starting fresh on a level playing field.
All right, I have one more question. Like, if your level is 0, you don't have any knowledge about the languages like a JavaScript or HTML or the CSS. So you guys will like teach us like from the beginning, like from the ABCs, or no, we have to take the introduction classes like from the YouTube or from the another website or something, or you guys want to teach us from the beginner? Because I used to took classes from the team Treehouse, but I completely forgot now what was the concept before that. So I just want to remind all of these concepts again and start it again. So you guys will help us out about starting from the level 0.
So let me take that. So basically, so you're part of Career Karma now. And just by a show of hands, how many people joined Career Karma without knowing what JavaScript was? Anybody? I know Greg is. So look at all the hands, right? And the beauty of it is that there's no prerequisites about knowing anything except your curiosity. And so the reason we built our community is now you can reach out to people who are a few steps ahead of you. And you can ask them, so what are they doing? 1 second, let me mute some folks. Can people mute themselves? Otherwise, I'm gonna have to remove you. Okay. And so the beauty is that that's the karma piece. Someone helped them when they just joined, and now when you reach out to them, they're going to help you, and then someone else will reach out to you in a few weeks, and you'll help them get started. There's apps like Grasshopper. Since you've been on Team Treehouse, you actually are starting more advanced than others. And through this process, you'll first get to see if you like HTML, if you like JavaScript, and then then you'll find out about boot camps, and then you can decide if you want to keep going or not. Career Karma is also completely free, so you'll never have to pay us a dime. The only thing we ask is to help people behind you, and you can discover a new career. Cool.
That's a good thing. That's why I joined it, because the Team Treehouse is so expensive for me, and you guys like offer it free for helping the people. That's the good thing. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for answering.
Thanks for welcome, and thanks for asking so many questions. Anybody else wants to jump in and ask Matt some questions?
I've got a question for Matt. If you got a second.
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Hey, Timur, how you doing? Matt, my name's Craig. I am currently attending Flatiron Bootcamp online. I live in Columbus, Ohio. They have Chase Bank has quite a lot of offices and stuff here locally. I know some of the bigger companies lately, at least from what I've read, have been dropping the requirement for like a college degree or a CS degree. Do you know, because you work with JP Morgan, have you heard anything like that with Chase Bank or JP Morgan also hiring more like boot camp type grads or lightening the requirements for the college degrees?
So a lot of companies will put college degrees in there and not be strict about it. It might, and a lot of them actually also say degree or equivalent. And that's really in lots of cases for the reviews by the recruiters and some other kinds of things. I've actually had a lot of people that are trying to decide what these programs are ask me literally which schools and degree programs should we focus on, right? And my response to that is, I know where they're coming from, but going back to what I said before, if you get a whole bunch of people from that same program, you're not going to be able to solve problems in a robust way. So these companies are starting to come around. The best thing that I can say for you is, apply for the jobs. Now you can go to meetups and meet people in your area that work at all the local tech companies and make those connections. Networking is valuable anyway. And often a referral is the best way in the door, right? But what you're really going to look for is, can I get that job interview? And that's where I'm really going to demonstrate my skills.
I've actually attended a couple meetups here locally for a Ruby meetup because I'm learning Ruby at Flatiron. And I highly recommend anybody and everybody, when you get to that point, definitely find out what meetups are in your town or city, because I've already met several people as far as networking that work for companies here in town that are going to be looking for, specifically Ruby Rails developers come January, February of this next year, about the time I'm done with school. So highly recommend doing that. That's a great way to meet people too.
I mean, just a point of note, there's I don't have a computer degree in CS, right? So it's not the end of the world, right? It's not the thing you need.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Matt, in terms of standing out during the job search process, what advice do you have for people? Because I know everyone says you need a portfolio. What impact does a portfolio have? What things do you look for on people's portfolios? How should people approach that?
So for me, that's not really going to be something that I'm super interested in. I may have, some of my developers may just go because they're curious and learn things there. But what I can say, the most important thing is to recognize that the company can't hire you unless you also say yes. You have a responsibility in this equation, and it's also your job to determine whether or not the company is a good fit for you. And one of the things that's great about that is that means that you need to take the company seriously, and you need to learn about the company, and that's actually going to put you in a better position to present yourself, right? People will always recommend to create a personalized or a customized cover letter, right? It's not just about give them the impression that you care about this role or that you know about it. Actually know about it, actually care about it, right? And be honest.
Yeah. And we always say that when it comes to interviews, like the story you tell about yourself and the research you do about a company actually makes a big difference, because you also come off more enthusiastic. Like if someone is coming from a non-traditional background, you don't have a computer science degree, but you're applying to a company like Chase, having a strong reason for why Chase versus Bank of America or why Chase versus a healthcare startup can also make someone stand out during the interview, because you'll just come off very enthusiastic, and your interviewers can feel that. Do you ever feel like when you interview more junior people for their roles, either college grads or bootcamp grads, you see the potential in them and you hire them for the potential of like what they can be, or do you expect them to already kind of have the experience and know how to do the job?
So it's definitely the former, and that's so when people start off, they really don't have any specialization. So you expect that there to be some training involved. Everybody that starts at the entry level, either coming out of college or coming out of a boot camp, the first thing that you need to teach them about is, well, how does software development work at a company, right? And so you trust them and to make decisions and to learn about those things, right? For me, I think that it's just enthusiasm isn't the only thing, right? But I definitely do see that. I can tell because I know what is available out there about WePay, where they went, how much research they did, or if they did any, right? And if somebody knows a lot about WePay and they've done a lot of research and they can tell me about our product, well, they've taken the time to learn those things. And you're not just being assessed on technical skills, being resourceful, actually being involved and being able to make logical deductions based on information that you have is also really valuable. So, I mean, don't ignore that kind of thing. Do your research.
Yeah. Anything else that stand out to you when you speak to people who are interviewing for a job?
Well, in particular, very junior candidates, one of the things that that I've seen a lot of actually is people that don't want to disqualify themselves, right? And so if you ask them something like, what is it that they're actually interested in? WePay and a lot of companies that are growing so quickly, right? There's actually a huge array of things that we can offer, and helping to, or having a good understanding of the things that are actually interesting to you is going to help us, better understand whether or not we can offer you or how to best offer that to you. And so, again, be honest about that. And, if people are asking you, what are your career objectives? For us, it's really important. And I've seen that, also with interns and other people like that, well, what do you want to do? Well, I'll do anything, right? Another thing specifically for boot camps that I've noticed, which is something that is kind of particularly difficult, is I've noticed a lot of boot camp graduates lack some of the nomenclature, all right, that they teach, right? And so in a hypothetical situation, if I ask somebody, what's a hash map, right? If I am catering to a CS grad and they say, I don't know what that is, then I might very naively say, doesn't even know what a hash map is, right? But that's actually not how a lot of boot camps teach things. I've noticed that boot camps graduates tend to understand these concepts and sometimes actually don't know what they're called. I was actually in a situation, and while I was interviewing a candidate from a boot camp, and she was using an approach, and I said, that looks like a binary search. And she told me, I don't know what that is, right? And so I decided to ignore that and to talk to her about all of the different attributes and optimizations. And she knew everything about it, just didn't know what it was called, right? And the unfortunate part about that is that in lots of situations with lots of companies, they might not actually learn that about her. And I hired her, and she worked for us for several years and did very, very well.
Mm-hmm. That's great info. And I think people think that when a company hires you, they don't know that this is an entry level job, right? That's why, like, going into a lot of interviews, people are like, I might, like, if I tell them too much about my accomplishments and my experiences, I might come off too senior. And people tend to undervalue how much they already know. And I think for your job search, you want to talk about the projects that you've built, like things that you've done that show your employer that you can actually, like, you may not know the technology that the company is using, but you've built an app that has a back end, a database, a front end, and you're able to reason through how you put your app together. When it comes to like hiring someone like a bootcamp grad, what is your expectations from them? Like, what are the expectations in terms of you hired them? What's next? Like, just so people get an idea of kind of what the employers are looking for.
Sure. So at least at our organization, I really believe that, and I really strive to make sure that nobody is ever in a situation where they feel like something is expected of me. I have no idea how I'm going to do it. I don't have the resources or the help that I need to be able to do it. Right. As I mentioned, that anybody coming in at the entry level and coming out of a boot camp, you're coming in at the entry level as a software engineer. You know, what we need to teach you is how software is actually developed. You may have been involved in your own projects. You may have done some pair programming and other kinds of things and developed some of these core skills, which is great. But how do you actually leverage that software in a company? You know, even if you have exposure to things like databases on the back end, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of information to how to build and run and architect those things at scale, right? I don't expect that, right? I expect that you have gained a reasonable grasp of the concepts that are core to being a software engineer, and that you are interested and capable of learning, that you are a good communicator. If there's something that you're expected to be able to understand, you need to be able to explain that to another software engineer in particular. At least in our environment, everybody works on a team. So if you can't communicate with your team, you're not going to be successful, even if you're great in a silo, right? So, you know, but again, you know, all companies are different, and there are lots of variances. I mean, for things like communication, most companies do value that, but you know, those are the things that you should ask the companies. Like, what is important? You know, like I said before, part of your responsibility is to learn about the company.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I want to see, we have about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes left. Anybody else have any questions for Matt?
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Matt. I'm getting ready to start a boot camp on Monday, and everybody's always, I think, worried about the technical interview once you get out of the boot camp. So do you have any recommendations for the best way to prepare for a technical interview once you graduate from a boot camp?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I recently published an article on my LinkedIn that literally is how to prepare for a technical interview. And so I'll send a link, I'll put a link to that in the chat, you know, before we're done. But really a lot of it is just, it's really tedious, but it's actually pretty simple, right? So there are lots of resources available to you. What you want to do is to get a large problem set. You know, there are books like Cracking Coding Interview. You know, that's one of my favorite ones. You know, Gale is great. You know, just has a huge bank of problems and solutions, and go through a problem. You know, get yourself a whiteboard equivalent. That's what you're going to be doing in an interview, right? And thank you. Somebody posted the, posted the article. But you know, so get yourself a problem bank. Get yourself an equivalent environment, right? Writing it on a piece of paper is not going to be the same as a whiteboard that you're going to likely have to do in an interview. And there are some companies, Slack, for example, doesn't use whiteboards. That's great, but most companies will expect you to do that, so you don't really have a choice, right? And go through the problem, you know, come up with your solution, evaluate yourself, and then go on to the next problem, right? In an interview situation, you're going to be presented with something that you likely don't have fresh in your mind, so just doing something repeatedly is not going to really help. Right. So, but if you have any questions about the article or anything after you've gone through that, you know, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or you know, through the article.
Thanks. I'm getting ready to put a 4x8 whiteboard up in my schoolroom tomorrow.
That's great. Let's see. Anybody else have questions for Matt?
I got a question.
Yeah, jump in, chat.
Let's see. First Teamer, thanks for the way you've set up Career Karma, because it's really cool that I went from feeling overwhelmed with all this information to now I'm really excited to tune into this discussion. It's worth my time and it's exciting to learn about. And then Matt, thanks for being here. And so I'm on day 5. I'm a divorced dad, 43, live in North Little Rock, Arkansas. And I just found out yesterday about the role of a user experience engineer, and that interests me. So I would be interested to know what WePay and Chase are looking for in that regard, and what I could do to direct my path in that way to take advantage of what y'all are looking for. And then I'm interested in that you've been programming since 7 versus me learning at 43. I'd be interested to hear your perspective on the different points of view and outcomes you've seen with how long people have been coding. And is there anything going on in terms of teaching financial literacy to people like myself that have made some poor decisions? You know, anything to teach people a better way through technology? Thank you.
So, I mean, that's a lot there, you know, so the user experience engineer, you know, is something that doesn't necessarily have a, you know, very agreed upon definition across industry. At least in our environment, that's going to be something that absolutely exists on our front end team. I have noticed that a lot of bootcamp programs naturally have alignment more with the front end types of responsibilities, and the front end is really what the user sees, right? The user experience. So you know, that sort of makes sense there. And you know, as a matter of fact, most of the bootcamp graduates that we've hired have gone on to the front end team, and so that's you know, we're looking for still the same core concepts, but you're going to have a lot more exposure to a lot of the front end technologies with JavaScript, you know, React, and other kinds of web technologies. Now, as far as some of the other stuff is concerned, you know, programming from 7, that's just something that I've always known. And I know a lot of people that weren't programming since they were 7. You know, when I was in high school, or, you know, just after high school, it made a difference because everybody else had just started and I'd been doing it for, you know, 10, 15 years, right? Or however long. And so there was a really big gap there. But then, you know, 10, 15 years later, you have a lot of people that have, you know, normalized in lots of ways and kind of specialized in their own ways. So what I really would say about that is that you're starting when you're starting, right? One piece of advice that I got from my dad was that, you know, you're always in a situation where you might think I'm too old for whatever it is. And then like 5 years later, you then realize that I wasn't too old 5 years ago, but I am now. And the reality is that you're never too old, right? Do it, right? If that's what you want to do, but also recognize that if you're starting at 43, you're starting at 43, right? And so you have to build on that, right? And as far as the financial instruments are concerned, there are actually lots of software that's available that, you know, depending on what your situation is, that, you know, that helps to, you know, educate people about financial instruments and how to use them well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And Chad, I would also encourage you to reach out to other people in Career Karma as you're doing the 21-day challenge and ask them about different financing options that they chose. I think a majority of people are using income sharing, but not all income sharing agreements are the same. And so make sure that you speak to people from different schools and you find out about like how it's structured, what are the terms and things like that. Cool.
I got one question.
Yeah.
Like we cannot switch the bootcamp, like it's a necessary if you are working with the one bootcamp, so you have to graduate from the one bootcamp, or you can just switch, or you can move into the other bootcamp if you would like to.
So that's a good question. So basically when you're starting out, there's a lot of boot camps that give you a free prep course. Usually that prep course is about 50 hours, and you can do as many of them as you want. And that will give you a good introduction. And you can actually see the school's teaching style, and you'll get like an initial interaction with some of their like tools and software. So you can do a number of them. However, if you already commit to actually like enroll into a school, then it would not make sense for you to jump from school to school. It would make sense for you to just graduate that school. And if you're doing full time, it's usually about like 4 to 6 months, and part time is about a year. And then if you commit to that, then you got to stick with the school, because then there's also financial obligations. Like if the school is doing income sharing, then it's true that that you don't pay them until you get a job, but they still want you to graduate, you know?
Okay. I saw one thing about in your app or something, like it was saying like 17% of your income sharing. What that means is the same thing
Yeah.
you're telling me about?
I'll let Greg, if you want to jump in, since you're doing Lambda, maybe you can explain how that works.
So Lambda has a ISA that will allow you to, they will pay for you to go to school, allow you to finish school, and allow you to find and help you to find a job. And they do everything, and I do mean everything possible, to help you ensure success in finding a job and having the correct skills, or good skill set to be able to make it through Lambda. And they will set you up with an agreement that if you're able to find a job within tech making over $50,000 a year within 5 years, then you will pay 17% of your income to them for 2 years at a maximum of $30,000. So if you are making $100,000 a year, you pay 17% of that. You pay 17% of that out of each check until that actual number is met, which is up to $30,000, but I think it's at 20. I think it's 20,000 total. So, you know, you can set it up with them and they can help you. You have some schools that only take 10%, of your income. But what you're doing is you're kind of bartering your education versus the potential pay that you can make, where you don't have to put anything up front. They put resources into you and ensure your education is a success in your program. All you have to do is make sure you continue to be consistent and keep learning.
All right. Thank you.
And since we have Matt, I think a lot of this stuff you will learn. And let's see if there's any other questions from Matt about the hiring process or preparing for the tech interviews.
Yeah, I have a question.
I got a question. Okay.
Travis, I think you were first. Jump in.
Hey, man, nice to meet you, buddy. I have a question about, okay, so someone graduates from a boot camp or college.
Go ahead, Travis.
Graduates from college with a computer science, computer software degree, and they just have the degree or the boot camp. When they come in, you ask them, you just go over questions about their schooling, and do you go through their experience also, or do you just do a little bit of all that for people that are just entry level?
So we actually do a pretty comprehensive evaluation. What we do first in the phone interview process is actually optimizing things that tend to be the most problematic on site. For that reason, we do certain types of coding exercises and also go into some communication whether or not to bring somebody on site. And if you come on site to interview at WePay, you will have 4 main modules. And I'll go ahead and just describe those for you a little bit right now. One of them as an entry-level position would be what we would call everyday coding. The everyday coding module is really what you would be doing every day. One of the real fundamental concepts of that is that it's really important that we recognize that people don't often ask for things, or let me phrase that a different way. People often ask for things in terms of what they think the solution to their problem is, and not necessarily, what the actual solution would be. And so what we expect software engineers to do is to make sure that it's clear what it is that you're expected to do before you start writing code to solve that problem, right? And so all of the coding and the computer skills are really, they need to be a given kind of module. You're really going to have a conversation with your interviewer to make sure that it's clear what the problem is, and then go and do that. The second coding module is what we call algorithmic coding. It's not, what everybody argues about online, pulling some argument out or algorithm out of a hat, and you're supposed to do that. That's not a very good use of time. What we're really looking for is you have a tool set. There are some concepts, design patterns, algorithms, data structures that and do you understand them? Can you leverage them? And if I give you a new one, explain it to you, can you understand and apply that, right? And so the same thing applies where, the coding is really expected, but we're gonna go over that tool set, right? We're also going to spend time, well, as an entry-level position, you'll have a third module of coding, which is one of the two of those. And just so we have more coding signals, an entry-level job in our organization at least will be about 90% code or coding. So, we really emphasize that. And the last module is going to be a combination of more deep dive into your background and communication skills, your teamwork and coachability, that sort of thing, and the kind of light design exercise. We don't expect anybody at the entry level to have very thorough design experience, but we do want to know that you can work with somebody else. There are lots of different ways that this might be presented. I might give you a problem in a design interview that I know you can't solve by yourself. And so what I might be trying to do is see, can you actually work with me and take my guidance to come to a solution that you understand and that is deliberate, and work with me to do that.
Thank you for that. I at my current job, they basically, when they give you like promotions and stuff, they do go through like, it's not coding, but it's different questions that make you show that you can think through problems that you have or that you have had before that you can think through. So basically almost like other interviews, but it's just coding. So that's basically what you're describing.
Well, any interview that we do, the real objective is to try and get a good signal about whether or not you would be successful on the job, right? So, we're going to, as best as we can, have a lot of alignment with the things that you would actually be expected to do and what those skills are. On the downside is that we only have a short amount of time to do that, and so we have to really, get as much data during that time as we possibly can. And again, we might, or any company might not have enough data to make the decision they would have otherwise wanted to make, right? And so you have to be comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Great. So I know it's almost 9 p.m. on the East Coast and 6 p.m. on the West Coast. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Matt, in terms of staying in touch with you, what is the best way for people to connect? Is it Twitter, LinkedIn, email? What are some ways for people to stay in touch?
So you can, and anybody here, send me a connection request on LinkedIn, send me a note, right? You can follow the stuff that I have on LinkedIn. I have a whole slew of articles that I'm, in various stages of, completing. I'm sort of behind that, but yeah, send me an email, right? Connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't use my Twitter account much, not since like 2007 or so. Yeah, I probably should do that more. But find a way to reach out to me. I'm looking at all that stuff, and I will help where I can. Yeah,
and this has definitely. I'm getting messages from people telling me how much they've learned just by speaking with you. I always end our AMAs by asking our guests to talk about the imposter syndrome. Can you explain to people what imposter syndrome is, and what is your advice for helping people overcome imposter syndrome?
Sure. So imposter syndrome, I actually mentioned a little bit before. It's just the feeling that you don't belong, right? And you're feeling like everybody around you belongs and you don't, right? And so this is something a lot of people experience. Everybody at some level can experience this. Like, even, I've been in situations, recently where somebody has actually asked me to give some kind of talk, and you go and do that, and then afterward you're in some panel or something at some conference, and you think, well, did I just make a fool of myself? And and then people are just telling you how great that was. I actually read in a book called Daring Greatly, one of the most famous TED Talks that is on there, the speaker there experienced exactly the same thing, right? So you're in good company if you feel that way. But one piece of advice that I would give to you is believe in yourself, right? And ask for a question, or ask for help. Like, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. That's how you're going to grow, right? And one thing that is sort of related, a lot of people are timid about reaching out and asking for help for people that they think might help them. They, think something like, which is called imposter syndrome, that person is too important, whatever they're doing is, I would just be interrupting. Like, people can't say yes if you don't ask. And what you will find in the overwhelming majority of the time is that people will say, well, yes, I will teach you everything that I know. Thank you for asking, right? But believe in yourself, don't give up, and keep trying.
Yeah, and I would just add on top of that Matt took his time to meet with us because he genuinely wants to help people. And there's a lot of people like that in tech who also realize that they came in from a non-traditional background. They didn't have a computer science degree, and they're eager to help, but they also might be working a lot, and they might not have a channel to help all of you. So I would also say it's on you to also do your research on the company. Don't just reach out to Matt or someone, one of our guests or someone on Twitter without doing your research. But if you do your research and there's a reason why you want to reach out to them, you have a good questions to ask them, most people will read it and they'll want to help you because we're all human. We all know what it was like to be on the outside. And so I want to once again thank Matt for coming. Let's give Matt a round of applause, everyone. Yeah, Matt, thank you so much. And if you enjoyed this, folks, send out a tweet and you can tag Career Karma and share whatever you learned tonight. Thank you. Okay. So,
sorry, I have a one last question. I guess you're recording the video. So if we want to share to our friends to know about the coding and how your apps work, so how can we share this conversation? Like, I'm seeing the sign, the red sign is like showing me like you are recording. So would you like to share the link so we can share to our friends and they will learn about it who missed this meeting today?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm recording it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and then I'm going to send out this link in the community in different groups. And so I would love for people to share it with someone, their nephews, their friends, anyone who needs a job or anyone who wants to learn about tech. And Matt took his time to give us his unique perspective. And we have meetings like this happening every week. Last week, we had someone from Thinkful who is a Bootcamp grad. And soon we're going to have Greg and Craig and everyone else who's going through the boot camps also joining in to share their experience. And one day, every single one of you is going to be on this call. So this is just like the cycle of life, and the karma just keeps going around. So keep going. Don't give up. And let's break in, everyone.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nord. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you.
We need more of this as much as possible. This is all good stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll have you back in a few months as well, Matt. It's a pleasure.
Of course. You guys have
yeah. So and I want to also make one last announcement to our community.